Hola, culers. My name is Adrian Białkowski, and joining me today, as he does every episode, is my colleague Michał Gajdek. Today we have a very special guest with us. He's a journalist based in Barcelona. He's covered La Liga and Barça for many years now, and also has been assigned to follow Spain's 2010 World Cup in South Africa and 2012 Euros, winning side under coach Vicente Del Bosque. His name is Graham Hunter, and we've been looking forward to having him on our channel for a while now. So glad that we have finally a chance to talk. Hola, Graham. How are you?
Hola, but hold on a second. If I understand that introduction correctly, the people know my voice for a reason, because I think at least my voice has been on every episode, right?
Not every episode, but at least 35 episodes. Yes, since we did
some time now.
Yes. That's what my agent promised me. He said minimum of 35. I said, okay, where do I sign? So it's good.
Yes. So to those of our viewers who don't speak Polish, we do a podcast in Polish, and Graham was kind enough to do the intro, actually speaking Polish, and everybody loved it, and everybody says that you have a really good pronunciation. So
yeah, surprisingly good, because it's quite a difficult language, as you probably know. So
it is a difficult language unless you want to say kurva all the time. Then it's quite hard work. But I keep trying to master dziękuję and dobre, etc. And whenever I'm there, as I was last week in Gdansk for the Europa League final, I listen and I try to pick up a little bit more. But in 2012, because we were there for so many weeks, I really made an effort to try and pick up some phrases. And difficult, yeah, but fun. If you get anywhere near a sentence, it feels fun.
Yeah. Okay, so if we can start with this, actually, how did you like the final, and how was the climate in Poland like?
Yeah, thanks, Adrian, for that question. It was shocking. There's a reason. I don't know if this is a universal word, but in Scotland, the word for cold is Baltic. How's the weather? It's in Baltic. Yeah. So if you're in a hotel in Sopot, next to the Baltic, guess how the weather was? It was Baltic.
Right.
I really enjoy Poland whenever I go. I think my personal feeling is that whenever you talk about any country or any set of people, if you generalize them, there's a risk of sounding stupid. But every time I've been to Poland, which is now maybe, I don't know, a dozen times, and every time I meet people from Poland in the situations I go into, so I don't meet people in banking or politics or blah, blah, blah. They seem like Scots to me. They seem really similar to Scots to me. Quite full of passion. We all quite like to drink and make a lot of noise. We love our football. We all have to suffer grey weather. The treatment from the Polish people every time I've been around the country has been magnificent. Maybe that's because you're a foreigner. Maybe that's because there's a tournament or a cup final on. But I really, really enjoyed it. The Gdansk stadium I still like working in. It's easy to work in. The guy, I wish I could remember his name. I worked as a stadium manager for a little while. He was absolutely brilliant. So knowledgeable, so professional, so quick. And although the pitch isn't necessarily just the best pitch, it's still quite, for fast-passing football, it's still a little bit slow. Still a little bit not lumpy, but I've seen better.
We have a problem with this in general.
Really? How come?
With pitches.
Not enough sunlight
as well. Yeah, but also the construction of the stadium. Supposedly, it's also got to do with the wind circulation, with the air circulation within the stadium. That it doesn't help.
I'll tell you this, for sure the surface was better than in 2012. For sure it was. And it's a minor point, so maybe I should ignore it. But really, the first thing you asked me about was being in Poland in the final. The first thing for me, and I don't know if we talked about this previously, but when you're a journalist, or certainly when you're one like me and the people I respect, on the day before the game to have two 90-minute training sessions, which are completely open. This is where you learn. Almost that was better than the final for me. So you get to watch both teams, Villarreal and Manchester United. What's the communication? What is the coach trying to teach? How does he teach it? Which players look good in training and then bad in the match? Which players look bad in training but then great in the match? Which look good or bad in both? The amount that you can learn if you pay attention is almost endless. And the mentality of the two sides was really clear in the training sessions, because the word basculación in Spanish means to never lose equilibrium, never lose balance in terms of where you want to press. So basculación means that if you're a little bit like this, you must go like that until you're like. And what we saw was really clever training exercises, whereby, for example, Unai Emery would be at this goal with a goalkeeper behind him, and he'd give all the instructions. He non-stop did the coaching. So, for example, Hola, culers is not the coach, he's the manager. Unai Emery is the manager and the coach. Not every boss of a team, international or club, takes training all the time. Often the manager will watch and assess, and the coaches take training. Not with Emery. Emery does both. So one of the exercises I really liked was when Emery has the ball in his hands, he's bossing all the players, and because every squad player and a couple of coaches played, probably there was about 12 or 13 per side. So his instruction was, Emery kicks the ball long, and the defending team is under instructions to chest it back or head it back to the attacking team, so to give away possession immediately. And the attacking team must seize on it and try and go up the pitch in as few, not long balls, but in as few quick construction passes as possible. And the team which has lost possession is asked to hacer basculación, to press as a group, to move across, to close spaces, to prevent the move from going upfield. So watching that in action, the idea that Villarreal thought they would be under pressure most of the game, the idea that they thought they might have to break and score on the break, not long ball counter, but what they call transitions. That's the cool word now for it. Watching them practice that over and over again was really interesting. Whereas Manchester United's idea, which they failed to use in the game, which must be a frustration to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and nobody's going to pardon him for it and say, oh, well, Ole, it was actually a pleasure. They had the ball fed out from the centre circle always to two wide, mostly wing backs. There'd be a guy coming at them to pretend defend. They wouldn't block, but he'd come and jockey. So he'd be the opposing wing back. He'd come and jockey, but he'd let the ball go in. And when the ball comes into the middle, there'd be either two attackers, be three defenders, or three attackers, be two defenders, alternately. And the idea was that the ball should come into a testing area where they expected Rulli, the Argentinian, to either have to come and punch or catch, or to decide he couldn't go, because they rightly thought that if the ball was played in properly to Rulli often enough, then he would make a mistake. Against Arsenal both legs, and against Manchester United particularly, it was clear that Villarreal's Argentinian goalkeeper, who ended up hero obviously by saving a scoring a penalty, was out of practice, and that when he came for it, often he was flapping at it. And the training exercise did two things. It made it look as if Manchester United were almost guaranteed to score from that route. And the training exercise showed David De Gea the night before in as good form as I've ever seen him, stopping everything from close range. Unbelievable. Then, day of the game, what the fuck? They don't put the ball in. David De Gea is the villain, not the hero. It was really incredible, really valuable and interesting as my answer to you. That's something I truly enjoy.
I think what we all enjoy the most is actually watching players live, and we didn't have this chance for a long time now. You've obviously had some a bit more luck than us, but we haven't been to a proper game for a very long time. I've been to some Barça B games, but it's not the top level. So hopefully this will change, and there are rumors that we should be at 50% capacity come August. So let's hope this is true. My question to you is you're from Scotland, from Aberdeen, and obviously the Mighty Dandies are your childhood club. And you've said actually on your podcast, I heard you say that you are not a Barca fan, but you've lived in Barcelona for many years and wrote a book on that team. You did Take the Ball, Pass the Ball as well, the film. So how did it all start for you, and why did you choose Barcelona as a place to be? Because if you just follow La Liga, then you could be in any other town.
The key thing to say is that in 2002, when the decision was made, it was to try and escape London. I was losing out on a job that I loved, and my wife said to me, look, you've always wanted to live in Spain. Why don't we give it a try? And that was not for the sunshine, nor for food, nor for the language. I had no contacts, no offers of work. The reason that we chose that was specifically because of my love for Spanish football. And when you assess to earn a living as a freelance, it would be lovely to think you could go and live in Vigo or Almeria, but you can't, not if you want to earn a living. You're effectively left choosing at maximum 3 cities, in my opinion. In those days, in 2002, which was Valencia, Madrid, Barcelona. Valencia, Levante weren't forced then. 2 clubs, 1 club I didn't think was enough to earn a living. Madrid tempted me, but Madrid was huge, like London. I wanted a change. Madrid didn't have a river. I had to live by the sea or a river. That's just something that has been true of all my life. I have to live by open water. And Steve Archibald was an Aberdeen player. He was one of the Mighty Dandies who won our first league title in Scotland since 1955. I'd become friends with him. I phoned him up from London in 2002 before I was going to come here, and he helped me a lot. And I thought, if Steve Archibald can play at Aberdeen and eventually go to Barcelona and be a success, so can I. And so it was a good choice. Things clicked into place really quickly. Steve is now my neighbour. In fact, if you really want to see it, everybody who's watching this on video, if you see the top flat, the top corner of the flat that's behind me, that's where Josep Maria Bartomeu lives. So I don't just have Steve Archibald as my neighbour.
Your neighbours.
Unfortunately, got Idiot Barto as my neighbour.
So have you seen the Mossos, the Squadra, a few months ago coming to the house to search it?
They were there, and the media were down. The media were down there on the ground, queuing all around him. And you know, I'm not gonna, as they say, box his ears or punch his nose. But if I see him in the street, I'll tell him what an idiot he's been.
Yeah, he's not the greatest. Yeah, we actually took part in a moción de censura against him. We tried to get some votes, some signatures to get him out. Michał, go on with your question now. I'm sure you're ready.
I was a little bit distracted about with the mention of Bartomeu, but I wanted to ask you because obviously you mentioned La Liga, you mentioned how you came here, and basically you've seen some different, I would say, periods in the La Liga history. Like when you came here, it was probably behind the Premier League. Then you saw the absolute, I would say, best league in the world. And nowadays, let's face it, it's a little bit worse recently. So I'd like to ask you, do you think like the Spanish football needs to adapt? Like what would be the way for Barcelona and for Real Madrid, which are obviously two biggest clubs, to compete, to have a fair, let's say, competition with the clubs that are rather richer or have richer owners, like in English Premier League, or direct with club states like Paris Saint-Germain? And if Super League was some kind of an idea that could, I don't know, make these differences smaller or not to expand them.
Michael, that's a lot of questions in one. Let me start with the last one. The Super League was an idea for pigs, and the people that joined it were behaving like rats. It was disgusting. They planned it and executed it like inept school children. They should have been embarrassed to have the idea. They should have been embarrassed about meeting in secret to plan it. They should have been embarrassed about the way in which they were railroaded by. I'm sorry, everybody, for the motorcyclists. Maybe that's Bartomeu making his escape now.
Yeah.
But like the one, judging by how they handled it, those clubs were organising a Super League. Everybody would turn up for one of the games, and somebody would say, "Did you book a referee?" Which we didn't book a referee. I think you were doing that, but where are the football? Where are the football? That's what kind of, they were a shambles. And to me, I get very passionate. A lot of people talk first about the fans. Fair enough, I agree. And the fans are crucial. I'm still a fan. I wouldn't be doing this job with such enjoyment if it was only for making a living. So the fans are crucial. I didn't see enough, and it disappointed me. I didn't see enough people saying, nobody asked the players. Why the fuck did nobody ask the players? So it's like MGM saying, we're going to make 50 more movies per season and make 50 billion. And we don't care what the actors or their agents think. That would never happen. Why did it happen in football? We're running our players into the ground. I don't care that some of them are sitting with 100 million euros in their bank balance. I don't care. So does Tiger Woods, so did Michael Jordan. In their time, so did Sam Snead, so did Stefano. Pound for pound, if you take the currency differences. The fact is, the players are getting to the point where they haven't really got much more to give without damaging their mental well-being, without being unable to produce high-quality football for us. We're taking them and treating them not like slaves. That's stupid. But we're treating them like commodities that we don't care about very much. We're kind of treating them the way that we've treated the planet over the last 2 years. And look what fucking mess it's in. That's what we're doing, and I find it abhorrent. So, Niall, your other questions about, I think that's a really difficult thing to answer properly. And listen, everybody who's joining us and listening for the first time, I don't pretend ever or now to be super clever. I can tell you what 20 years living in Spain and watching and listening tells me. I can give you my opinion. But I struggle with the same question as you asked me. So, for example, this is a microcosm answer. When under Tito Villanova, Bayern put 7 past Barcelona, and it was a Barcelona which was running away with the title in Spain, 100 points, Tito Villanova side of real quality, and players who would go on after they lost that disastrous match, they would go on to win a treble for us. I remember getting time eventually, not on the night, not by a long way, with Xavi and saying, "What the fuck, man?" And he said that it was just a case of fitness, nothing. I said, 7-0, mate, 7-0. He was saying we were in bad shape and injured. And to be fair, during that game, they got bashed around in the first leg, just like the first leg at Inter. There were some refereeing decisions which were very permissive. And Barcelona were exhausted and their legs were falling off and Messi wasn't fully fit and blah, 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 blah. But mentally also they weren't at it. Suddenly the difference was 7. A couple of years later, with some changes, but with a new coach, with a different level of fitness, with a different level of belief, Barcelona win the first leg 3-0 and are competitive in the second leg and go through to the final and win the treble. And Xavi's point was borne out. That, and I'm answering that, Michal, because you said, should Spain, should La Liga, should Spain's clubs, should Spain's players maybe change their attitude a little bit, or their form? Does it look like not just money, but does it look like the day now, as Rudiger showed for Chelsea, that the big, strong, hard-running men dominate? Well, maybe, going back to Basculation, maybe some of Spain's side have lost a little bit of equilibrium, a little bit of balance. So, is it the case now that, for example, Real Madrid don't look quite athletic enough? Yes. Does it look the case at the moment that Barcelona's ability to beat bigger, stronger, quicker teams has diminished because there is no positional play, the system play that used to get the big men running around and confused, that's diminished. So does it mean, does the upgrade, which is where the way I interpret your question, does the upgrade to be able to compete in football terms, does that mean that they need to slightly abandon their concepts and their beliefs about how to play with the ball and position and possession and pressing? Or does it mean that the concepts are still exactly as good, they just aren't doing them so well? And that's where I
say the second one. Yeah.
Okay, so
for me, it's as well the second one.
We share a point of view. And Spain's clubs are not going to be able to equal City or Paris Saint-Germain, the nation-state clubs, or the billionaire ownership of Abramovich. They aren't. They can spend big sometimes because they are not scared of going into debt, and they're viewed as being unbankruptable. Well, okay, for the moment, because of a variety of reasons, in Barcelona's case, the loss of revenue for COVID and disastrous, idiotic spending on Galactico-style deals that have failed.
Of your neighbor, yeah.
Of the idiot up there, correct? In the what do you call it? The Attico. And in the case of Real Madrid, I think that although they have, tremendous losses of revenue because of COVID, and they are spending a lot of money and incurring a lot of debt because of the stadium. Number one, their debt problem is less. Number two, the way that stadium is being designed with the pitch underground, under the Paseo Castellano. So it's Castellana, predominantly. So the pitch is going to be hidden in a kind of secret laboratory under the main road. And it's going to be taken along and then up and put in place for matches. But during the rest of the year, apart from, let's call it 18 La Liga, it's 4 Copa, 6, 12, let's say, I don't know, 14, 15 European games, that's 20 plus 18. 40 games, i.e. 40 days a year, there'll be a pitch there. The rest of the year, concerts, exhibitions, art, I don't know what. You could make it a giant open-air restaurant. The money flow that Real Madrid are going to have from it not being a football stadium anymore, a part-time football stadium, that money, that revenue that they're going to start to generate will make them powerful again. And thirdly, they haven't had idiotic, wildly overpaid deals that brought them no benefit like Barcelona have. And the final point is they were deliberately trying to save money to get Mbappe or Haaland or both. So in my opinion, Real Madrid, like Sevilla, for example, are not in such bad financial shape. They just aren't. Atleti's debt is huge, but they keep churning in nice money from the Champions League. They're going to be playing Champions League again. That you don't earn as much money for winning the La Liga as probably, I don't know exactly, but probably finishing 8th in the Premier League. So almost every club in Spain has to try to find its way to economic sanity first before you can even think about competing. And your point, Mihail, I think is true. There's been a talent drain. In recent years, big clubs in other leagues have been able to say to the younger players, come on, we'll play you now and we'll pay you more. And that's a pretty attractive package. And if, like a brain drain in any country, if the brains are being drained away, you become stupider. And Spain needs to find a way to combat that. There is a problem, I agree. But I still think that La Liga is not far from being the best league. In fact, pound for pound, I think it still is the best league. Pound for pound, weighing everything in. upper echelons of the absolute upper echelons of Germany and France, very, very competitive. The power of the English, who are now producing more technical, buying and producing more technical players to add to their to the athleticism, the height, the power, the aggression. Yeah, there's been a change there. Pound for pound, I still think. I mean, look, every single year for how many years it's been England or Spain winning the Europa League, but every single time over the last 9, 10, 11, 12 years, if an English club has met a Spanish club in a final, the Spanish club has won.
Yeah, it's been, if I recall correctly, 16th European final won in a row by a Spanish club against an English one. Like the last one, which was won by an English club, was the Liverpool one in the still UEFA Cup in the 2000s
against
or
Alaves,
2001. Like
against Alaves, like golden goal.
Yeah.
So look, my answer was too long, I understand, but it's just really what you're asking there. Nobody, you could be sitting asking, in my opinion, you could be sitting asking Florentino, or you could be sitting asking Leo Messi, or you could be sitting asking Monchi, and the answer wouldn't be simple. Maybe it would be better and clearer than mine. But I think you're asking a fundamental question, and therefore to get to grips with it and to be accurate is testing, I think.
You mentioned Messi, so let's talk about him for a little while. You mentioned in your book actually this game where he arrived to the Camp Nou, because obviously he went first to the Olympics and they got the gold medal, but then later we had this Trofeo Gamper against Juventus. And it was the game that everybody was just shocked to see how good is this kid. It was in 2005, so he was still a youngster. And I remember because my cousin actually went to for holidays to Barcelona, and he was at that game. And he came back and he told me, like, listen, this Messi guy, this little kid, is gonna be incredible. But since then, he never went actually back to Camp Nou. I don't know why, but this is another story. But I wanted to ask you, like, did you feel that this is a really special kid, or was it just another prodigy that we have? Another great talent, but it wasn't sure that he's gonna grow as big as he did.
No, first of all, I think to be I'll let you cut that sound out. To be honest, the first thing to say is I knew a lot of the players he was up against really well. Some of them I'd met them and interviewed them personally. So if I'm not wrong, in that team there were players like Nedved, Vieira, Cannavaro, and they were coached by Capello and they were taking it very, very serious. They were there to win. So one thing is true, that although I don't know if you guys remember him, but I grew up watching a player like Billy Bremner, Leeds in Scotland, who was about Messi height. I grew up watching a winger for Celtic called Jimmy Johnston, who was probably smaller than Messi. So I did see footballers who were able to cope in a world of bigger men. But I had never been live at a match seeing a player that small torment and taunt and dance around world-class footballers who, in the case of Vieira, had won the World Cup, and Nedved by that stage, I think had already been Ballon d'Or. I could be wrong. He might have been just about to be Ballon d'Or. I remember them looking at this guy as he danced around them, and I remember looking at them trying to foul him and knock him over, and they couldn't believe it. So, you know, I can't sit here and tell you, I fully expected this to happen. No, and you have to double the effect because Barcelona had been poor for a while, They were in the middle of a run of not winning trophies. That was about to be the season that they would win a trophy again. Or maybe had they won the league? I can't remember. Maybe they'd just won that league the first time. 2004-05, they won the league, right? Yeah. 2005-06.
Yeah, for the first time in a few years. Yeah.
So because that would have been 6 years since 1999. So to see Iniesta and Messi and Xavi connect in that game, but particularly because Messi is the one remembered. But if I'm not wrong, Iniesta scored a great goal in that game. And again, that ended 2-2. And again, this is straight from memory. If I'm not wrong, I think Barca lost to Gamper that year on penalties. I could be wrong, but I think they lost it on penalties. So what remains is the Messi story. But Iniesta that day was completely off the charts as well. I mean, completely unbelievable. Yeah. So the overall impact that day, Messi came off early, and the Camp Nou chanted his name over and over and over again. It felt like a twin eruption, that when you have Iniesta and Messi able to do those things with the ball at that speed, I thought, well, the minimum I'm going to have is some entertainment for the next few years. Obviously, there's no way of telling that he would become this, nor was there any way of telling that he would start to score at the rate that he did, because he was a scorer at junior level, and I'd been to watch him at junior level, and I'd understood from players that played with him that they saw something special. But we weren't seeing training all the time then. With the arrival of Rijkaard, gradually training got closed down. And therefore, to be able to anticipate what was coming, no, not really. But the impact was immediate, and the thrill. That's the thing. There was a thrill. There was, you were just like, this is incredible. You shoot me down if you want, and any second now I'm going to have to go and get my power pack to plug this in so it doesn't cut us off. But although he's a completely different player, I'm feeling a similar thrill of Pedri. He's not going to be 6 Ballon d'Ors, and he's not going to be 600 goals or any of that shit. And maybe he plays in an era where Barca aren't so successful. When I see somebody of that age able to do things that they shouldn't be able to do, then you know you're in the presence of a phenomenon. And again, it wasn't the same with Xavi, because Xavi wasn't playing the same position as later made him great. And the club was saying, to a friend of mine, you can sell him, you can find a club for him if you want. But from my eye, when I watched Xavi, I was like, that is just like listening to Chopin. That is beautiful music. I see what he can do. He needs to be moving further forward. Sometimes a player catches your eye and your heart flips with happiness. And that's what it was like with those two.
So you mentioned Pedri, and I have to say I'm one of the biggest Ansu Fati fans. Since the debut, I saw his debut at the Camp Nou, and then I've actually seen nearly all of his games that were with fans, and I think he's the biggest talent since Messi. So altogether, keeping Pedri, which you mentioned, in mind, Ansu Fati, also the other youngsters like De Jong, do you think they have a chance to reach that level that Barca once had, or it will never happen because this generation of players like Puyol, Piqué, Iniesta, Xavi, Messi were just unique, and it's never going to happen again?
Well, one thing I learned across the years, partly from experience, partly from interviews, was that to be winners like they were, not enough people talk about how hard they were, how tough they were, mentally tough. They were truly extraordinary guys. And I'll give you another example. In the Russian World Cup, after Spain was knocked out on penalties by Russia, I was in the flash zone, and we had an interview with Iniesta to say goodbye to World Cup and goodbye for him playing Spain. We finished it, and Carlos Marchena was one of the directors of football of the Spanish national team at that stage. and he'd been standing by listening, and I get on well with him. So I said, listen, Carlos, here we go again. Another mini disaster, out too early, bad display. And he just said to me, maybe now people will understand how hard it is to win a World Cup. And I think you take that message if you to do what you're asking and to try and make comparisons between 2009, 2010, 11, 12, and 15. Because, you know, we obviously understand that if you look at what Xavi and Iniesta and Puyol and Piqué and Busquets and Pedro and Valdez won in terms of national trophies and club trophies, they are some of the greatest players of all time. But not enough people talk about how they cope with stress, in the case of Iniesta, depression, boredom in the case of Piqué, terrible injuries in the case of Puyol, but also Abidal. Let's go outside the core La Masia people. Abidal had cancer twice and played in a Champions League winning final. Mascherano was told by Pep when he came, you know, you're joining to be a substitute. He took €1 million pay cut to join. He was supposed to not be able to pass, and immediately he was only supposed to be able to tackle, and immediately the Barca players saw how well he could pass, and ultimately he's has to play, even as a short guy, he's has to play at centre half. In my opinion, we could go on and on talking about Yaya Toure or Keita. There are other examples, and Dani Alves, for example, not La Masia, but the guy with the most trophies in the history of football for a reason.
Yeah, I think, for example, with Pedri, we all treat him as a La Masia product, but he's not. He just came out of Tenerife, and but we treat him as our kid because his DNA is what we actually produced all these years.
This is what I think is a miracle.
Yeah.
Irrespective of how much technical skill you have, it should be impossible for a newcomer of 17, which is what he was, to play like that. It doesn't matter about your ability. It shouldn't be possible for you to be a standout player that brings brains and positioning into the game. And the game was sorted out when Pedri was there, and it wasn't sorted out if he didn't play at fucking 17. I think he's a miracle. I don't understand how it's possible. But in the era you're comparing it with, you'd need another 6 Pedris. And I think it's clear that Pedri is mentally tough to be able to do what he's doing at his age, to take the knocks, to make the occasional mistake and not let it frighten him. That's extraordinary. Mingueza is interesting. Araujo looks more than interesting. De Jong has developed. Ansu, I'm fucking shit scared that he doesn't play again at that level because, you know, the particular injury he's got, that you should be able to fix it in 4 months. It's a really common injury. It's like crossing the road to the supermarket, buying your tomatoes and coming back to get it right, and they fucked it up, and he's now in his 4th intervention. So I'm scared about him. Anyway, and look, there's Nico coming through. Ricky Puig can play, blah 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 blah. But we shouldn't compare it. Also, don't compare this lot with that generation because it's so far short in terms of character, in terms of experience, in terms of the number of players who are homegrown or bought, who are great, not good, great. There is no comparison. And while times change and maybe they'll be up against easier domestic rivals, because Barca were up against a superb Sevilla side, superb Villarreal side, a good Atleti side, often a very good Real Madrid side. So maybe this version of Barca the next 2-3 years is up against sides that aren't that dangerous, and maybe they do. Maybe they do. Okay. But it's unhealthy and unhelpful for us to think that we're going to see in the next 15, 20 years as anything like we saw before. Again, it might happen. But think about the product of all the things that came together at the right time and that aren't there now. Like nobody ever talks about Soriano and England in the boardroom compared to what we saw on the pitch in 10 or 11 or 12. Very few people talk about Gdansk anymore, about what he brought and the players he signed. Very few people talk about Tito, either as assistant or as outright coach. All these people, for one reason or another, Cruyff's ability to say to Laporta, do this or do that or no or stop, think or whatever, just to be there for a council and a discussion. All that's gone. So how we can expect there to be anything similar to those great generations of 4, 5, 5, 6, and then 8, 9 until 15. I think it's unhealthy to even wish for it.
So what are your expectations for this term, let's say, of Laporta? Because, you've also described Laporta's first term as a president of Barcelona in your book. You've been there personally in Spain, and now we've come full circle. So you've already kind of answered this, but what do you expect of him now? Because clearly the situation is, very much different from the one in 2003. Also in terms of the people who surround him, including your neighbor, for example, that was there the last time. And also the situation is different from the last revolution that he led in 2008, that he hired Pep Guardiola, sacking Frank Rijkaard. So what are your expectations for him, both short term, let's say, like for this very transfer window where he already signed 2 players, as well as for the next few years, let's say, within his term of governing Barcelona?
Michal, they're low. My expectations are low. I wanted Victor Font to win because I thought that he had better ideas, clearer ideas. And I think he's been in waiting long enough that his plans were better. You and I, we both gave the clues away. Laporta is a guy who loves to be seen as a figurehead. He loves to be seen as John F. Kennedy. When he was elected the first time, his helpers told me that, that John F. Kennedy's camp in 1960 and 61 was called Camelot. And there's a book about Camelot, Kennedy and his rise. And they studied that in 2001, 2, 3, trying to recreate that atmosphere to make themselves electable. And that JFK figure, well, in terms of his extramarital indiscretions, I think he managed to match JFK too. Look, there's no way to say it differently than I did before. Joan Laporta is bright. He really loves and supports us. He's a million miles better in charge than Rosé or Bartomeu. But what made him great before was the combination of, even Rosé as a vice president in, say, 2003-4, when they had to use his contacts to bring Ronaldinho in, for example, served his purpose. But without Ingler and Soriano and Cruyff and Gdansk and Rijkaard and Pep Guardiola and Villanova, I don't think Laporta is a guaranteed success as a president. I'd like him to prove me wrong. But for example, if Johan Cruyff were alive, Barcelona wouldn't have been dallying around with this Super League and still be one of the clubs which is saying we're sticking to it. And even if you take us to court, which is happening, and even at the risk of being thrown out of the Champions League at a time when they desperately need new revenue, how can he be doing this? The basic idea is wrong. Everybody else apart from Florentino and the idiot Agnelli have run away. There is a real danger that they are heavily fined, and there's a real danger that they're kicked out of the thing that can help save their economic situation. and still they persist. And the reason that the European Half-Wit League was proposed and announced when it was so that the venture capital could be distributed quickly, so that Florentino could buy Haaland and Mbappe. So the rest of the clubs were corralled out into the open before they were ready, so the leader of the project could stick one on them by getting the two best players. So if Cruyff were alive today, there is no way that Laporta would have made that horrendous mistake and clung on to that horrendous mistake. And to be honest with you, I don't know whether his football judgment is going to be as good without the right brains around him. And I'd like to be wrong. And I'll be pleased if I'm wrong. La Liga needs a strong, at least a healthy football Barcelona, healthy particularly. And I don't think they are particularly healthy at the moment. I think they're in deep trouble. I think that trouble threatens to get worse. And I think that they threaten to be crying and whining like that little brat down there from Liga down in my street, whining and shouting and crying. So I'm worried, Mikhail. I'm genuinely, I worry about how he's going to reconstruct that squad. I do think he's going to grasp the nettle about reduction in the salary bill, and that's good. And that's good even if it costs them a season or two where they're not competitive in Europe and they're having to cling on to be top four. That happened before, and it's not the end of the world if Barcelona aren't lifting trophies every season. It just isn't. What's been happening since 2005 is abnormal, completely abnormal. It bears no relation to the entire rest of Barcelona's history. If you look back, it bears no relationship to it at all. Getting it healthy, getting the football Bassi system functioning properly, making the most out, not just the last 2 years or 3 years of Messi, but making the most out of Araujo and Pedri and Ansu if he's back, and De Jong, Mingueza, and all this kind of stuff. That's what's really, really important in my judgment. Ensuring that more of them come, making the most of Eric Garcia now, who's back. That's what's important, and I hope Laporta is successful at that. I'd like to see the incorporation of Jordi Cruyff. I'm really angry at Laporta. I think he has decided not to appoint Xavi because Xavi originally was with Victor Font. Well, when it came to it, Xavi didn't declare for Victor Font. Laporta was able to win the election partly because Xavi didn't come out wildly for Victor Font, and yet Laporta still won't appoint him when it's the blindingly obvious thing to do. And what's more, the way he talked, he's now going to keep Koeman because he can't afford to pay him off. All right, if that's the decision you're going to make that decision weeks ago and come out and say to Koeman, you've got another year, and finish the season without Koeman making decisions that were designed to maintain his own job, not because they were the right decisions for the football team. And the way he spoke about it the other day, where effectively, as Wasserman and Rob Janssen said, it makes it look like, I'll marry you if there's nobody better. Players listen to that. Never mind getting mocked by the agents. The players are like, look, the coach is weak, the coach is damaged, the president doesn't believe in him, the coach has got no authority over me. Laporta has left Koeman. I think it's an inept choice now. Whether you liked or didn't like Koeman overall in that year, it's now an inept choice to keep him because he's wounded him fatally in public. So, look, Michael, I think all the evidence, you didn't need to ask me the question, all the evidence for the answer to your question is out there in public.
Right. So I wanted to ask you about Koeman, but you kind of skipped this question, so we don't need to go over the poor Koeman again. So let's the last question. Let's make it a bit more light. Let's say, if you could choose prime Suárez or prime Lewandowski, which one would you choose to Barcelona?
Remember that you're in a Polish podcast.
That's such a trick question. But
yeah,
even you,
I know.
Even you two have to admit that there's no competition. I'm really sorry. Lewandowski is very tall. He's very handsome. He has a very clever wife. He follows a lovely diet. He scored a lot of goals this season. No question about that either. Luis Suárez is, as well as one of the most extraordinary finishers of modern times, he's one of the brightest footballers. So the way I throw it to you is, I'd love to be able to say to you, Poland, lovely Poland, lovely Lewandowski.
Don't worry, every answer is correct, since it's a Polish podcast, but also a Barca podcast, so there is no wrong answer.
There is no wrong answer, exactly.
If you put Lewandowski in that team with Messi, he is smart enough to have been able to cope. But Suárez and Messi breathed the same air, thought the same thoughts, and shared one gigantic football brain. And Lewandowski's different from that. I admire him. To be doing what he's just done at this age is spectacular. But Suárez is genuinely all-time special. And therefore, that's what I think you made me president of a hypothetical Aberdeen football club, or coach of a hypothetical Aberdeen football club, and you offered me prime Lua and prime Luis Suárez, and you both of you knew what I was going to say.
Yeah. Okay, so we started with the Polish topic, and we end with a Polish accent. Graham, it was a genuine pleasure to have you here with us on our show. We've actually waited to invite you so you can be at our podcast number 50, so we can be, as a godfather of our podcast. And there are many questions that we didn't have a chance to ask, but we don't want to keep you waiting. And also we want to invite you at least once again in the future. So maybe we'll have time.
Maybe even before the 100th. Or
we can definitely speak again just before Christmas, halfway through the 21-22 season. Once the World Cup is finished and the domestic season is about to begin again, you can definitely come back to me. And in the meantime, lads, good luck translating me into Polish.
Don't worry. We just did an interview in 3 languages last episode. I think it will be less work actually from English than from Spanish. We did the subtitles in English, Polish, and Spanish, so it was 4 days of hard work.
Okay, well,
but thank you for your concern.
I know you will do accuracy. All I ask for you is you to try to get my sense of humor in Polish.
Okay, we'll try that. We try. Graham, it was a pleasure. Thank you for being here with us, and to those of you who stayed with us until this moment, remember to please like and subscribe our channel so we can grow a little bit, and subscribe for more Barca videos. Thank you for being here with us, and as always, Visca el Barça.
Viva now Camp Nou, Viva Polonia.
Thank you.
Thank you.